China and India are leading the way in making the planet greener. According to a new NASA study based on satellite data collected since the early 2000s, the planet's green leaf area has increased by 5% due to factors such as human land use management and climate change. 1/3 of this increase comes from China and India, with China alone accounting for around 25% of the global net increase in leaf area. The two countries also happen to be home to some of the regions most impacted by pollution. How have they managed to grow their green areas despite their respective challenges? How impactful is the increase in the context of greater environmental protection efforts? Joining me for the discussion in the Beijing studio are Atul Aneja, Associate Editor of the Hindu and Einar Tangen current affairs commentator. Gentlemen, welcome to The Point. I want to start with taking a look at the latest tweet by NASA, which drew a lot of attention. The tweet says that good news for green thumbs, the world is a greener place than it was 20 years ago. Data from NASA Earth satellites shows that human activity in China and India dominate the screening of the planet thanks to tree planting and agriculture. By the way, this post on Facebook drew 6,000 thumbs up by the time I last looked at it. So indeed, it's very positive news. So Atul, give me your first reaction first. When you heard this story, were you surprised? Were you, what was your impression?
Not entirely surprised. I was following the Indian side more than the Chinese, which is more forest oriented, protection of the forests and expansion of that. But on the Indian side, it was linked to food security, that there were expansion of population and too many mouths to feed, so the state had an obligation to increase food production. And how do you do that is by increasing both the size and land area under which comes under crops and also the intensity of the crops. I think these two things happened, and because of the need for the very survival needs of his population, I think that drove it rather than idealistic motives like environmental protection or something. I think it was very practical reasons behind
the reason why I asked whether you were surprised, because that was the impression some people, that was the reaction some people were getting when they heard that the earth was getting so much greener because of efforts from China and India. For instance, according to Chen, the study's lead author and a graduate researcher at Boston University's Department of Earth and Environment, this is a surprising finding considering the general notion of land degradation in populous countries from over-exploitation. Einar, would you understand this kind of feeling, thinking you have so much population, the land must be, more exploited, but it turned out that these lands are actually greener?
Well, they're greener, but as you said, about 82% of the green that was added in India, for instance, was for agriculture. And between India and China, you only have 9% of the world's arable land. Now, if you start looking at, you're talking about a major chunk of the world's population, literally more than a third, getting towards a half. So when you start adding that up, it is amazing that they do it. But from the China side, it's very different. It's been much more environmentally sensitive. You're talking about forestry, so about 2/3 of the land that's the greenery that's been added has actually been through these tree planting programs that they've done. But it's not all good. I mean, in one hand, it's agriculture. Both sides are using much more intensive farming mechanisms, and that also means that they're using a lot more fertilizer. That fertilizer then is downstreamed. It has effects into the water and things like that. So there's a kind of a pull on this type of thing that has to be careful.
Well, can people look at the bright side of things just from with a happy smile for once? I mean, whenever we
I'm saying that for India it's a little more difficult. For China it's been much better because it's been trees. You don't have to put the fertilizer on the trees, so that is a very much improvement.
Because for China, yeah, the greening, 42% of the greening comes from reforestation and 32% comes from agriculture, which is very different from the India model, as we heard, as Atul said. Actually, in India, 82% comes from agriculture. I want to ask a bit more about why in China the effort to plant trees has been put at such a level of importance, both on the national level and in people's mind. I don't know, Atul, you have spent many years in China. What is your impression of the Chinese people's obsession with putting some green wherever you have soil?
No, I can see my first-hand experience. When I came here in 2014, the amount of pollution in Beijing was so much more than what has been there in the last few years. So there was at that time a virtual outcry, and when you talk to the people against pollution, then you also had linked to diseases like cancer, lung cancer especially, which sort of were getting conflated. So there was a big demand in China among the local people for cleaner air, and I think that the authorities here were sensitive to that demand, and therefore that went with it. Along with that, also, you know, the basic China dream of President Xi Jinping, which talks about a clean and green China.
Right.
So I think there was an ideological element, and there was also an element of demand from below, and I think a combination of that gave China that focus.
Actually, a lot of Chinese people were retweeting this story. They're really happy that finally the efforts that China has made in reforestation has been recognized. But for us, even in my teen years, when I was in primary school, every year at a certain time, in spring, we would go out and plant trees. This was a decades-old tradition. Einar,
yes, I remember.
How important is that? Yeah.
Well, I think it's, and it was not only school children. What you would do is all the leaders at the very top and at every provincial, city level, state and national level would go out and plant trees. So, and this would be televised along with the children going out and doing it. So it's leadership by example, and it's been very, very effective. But I mean, there were also some other parts to that. During the bad times, there was a lot of deforestation because people were literally just tearing up trees to burn for heat and cooking. And as a result, China has kind of pushed that back. I remember almost 20 years coming here and noticed the mountains were all completely deforested. I mean, there was these just kind of gray or red blocks of things. And now you go out and these mountains are now green again.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to brag about things, but I think China.
I
hate to appear to be bragging, but you know, sometimes we do have some good practices, and even not only I say it. I mean, during a conference last year, the UNEP executive director, he was talking about China's experience in reforestation being replicable to countries in other parts of the world, because we were hitting two birds with one stone. We were fighting poverty while fighting desertification, especially in this desert that's the 7th largest desert in China, called Kupuchi. There is even a model that's been framed around how people there fight that experience. Again, I want to ask Atul your understanding of the kind of model when China sets a goal. For instance, the Chinese leadership has decided that Green Mountain and clean water is, you know, where the future wealth lies. Then they are able to put resources into a nationwide campaign for decades, by the way, to realize this goal.
Yeah, I think the two models of China and India are contrasting in some way. Because here's a top-down, very efficient system which has evolved in China. I think partly it is to do with the Confucian tradition of hierarchy and meritocracy, which gets,
when there is a directive,
it has to be done. In India, it's different. It's more coming from below. It's a bottom-up kind of model, where there is a felt need. For example, food was a felt need, and food security, and the government of the day was sensitive to that. And once you realize that this has to be done, then you know, we had this green revolution, which started somewhere in the late 60s when this came into, where we needed water resources, irrigation, and that's where it really starts, and which gets accelerated as the population expands over there. So the models are a little different, but in the end, it's the political will which counts. Whether it is from bottom up or it's top down, but it has to be done.
How do you see the challenges for these two countries moving forward?
Like, the first thing I want to say is that we should stop looking over the shoulder of what X, Y, Z tells about us. I think these are two very self-confident countries. We have our problems and we have our own homegrown solutions. And we do it in our own way and in our own self-confidence. I think that's it. The mindsets are very different now than it used to be probably many, many years earlier. So you start with your problems, identification, and you target them. That's one thing. But as you go into the future, which was your question, now in India's case, I can tell you very clearly is water, which is going to be a very major issue. We had a scheme earlier, and it's been on the shelves for a long time, of interlinking all the rivers of India, so that you could divert water from surplus areas to deficient areas, etc. That has still not come. So I suspect that over the years, while you are greening for agriculture, there's likely to be water shortages unless we take these bold moves or making sure that water availability and clean water availability is there.
Okay, so again, the sustainability of the greening effort.
Long-term sustainability.
Long-term sustainability. Yeah, Einar, challenges for China?
Challenges for China is just dealing with the situation. I mean, there's rapid urban development, rapid manufacturing, and during that period it was kind of pollute to succeed. And now you're dealing with the things. Now, this is the formula that's been used in almost every nation, including the United States, Great Britain, Europe, you name it. So at this point, they have no choice but to pay attention to air. But you've seen tangible results. When you talk about, interlinking the things, the north-south, Beijing has actually done that. They've taken water and they can divert it from the south, where it rains quite a bit, up to the north, even to Beijing. So they have the will and the ability to do that. This issue about top-down and bottom-up, yes, I think each country has to deal with themselves, but in terms of long-term planning, China's been very successful. We can't deny that.
Yeah, okay. Well, I just hope that the result that we have seen will encourage people to continue go green in their economy, in what they do. Many thanks to my two guests, Atul Aneja, Associate Editor of the Hindu and Einar Tangen Current Affairs Commentator. And with that, we come to the end of this edition of The Point with me, Liu Xin. As always, follow me on Facebook and Twitter using the handle The Point with LX. Download the application called CGTN to watch the show on your mobile devices, or go to YouTube and look for CGTN The Point. Thanks for watching. You've got The Point, and I wish you a good weekend.